That happened. Now look, I love the first Joker. I thought it brought to life an interesting yet polarizing Joker origin story in the vessel of films we'd seen before, such as Taxi Driver and King of Comedy. Essentially just taking those two movies, blending them together with a comic book coat of paint, and the end result was a great but not perfect film that had a lot to say. It was beautifully made, it had incredible performances by Joaquin Phoenix as the titular character. The ending result was a deserving billion-dollar haul at the box office. Yet, despite the film ending in a way where it didn't need a sequel, well, this is Hollywood, baby. If your film gets nominated for Best Picture, your lead actor wins an Oscar, and the film makes $1 billion, it's getting a damn sequel. Well, enter Joker Folie, Deux, or Joker 2, that's what I'm going to call it for the rest of the video. If you needed a new poster child as to why great movies don't always need a sequel, well, this is it. This is the example. Joker 2 is a prime example of why not every film needs a sequel. Not only does this movie stray completely from what made the first one so great, going as far as making it a musical, which was a very weird decision that definitely did not pay off, but it also in fact insults the audience that liked the first movie, which was the large majority of people. And in turn, it brought us an unfocused, poorly paced, nothing burger of a sequel that adds absolutely nothing. In fact, it retroactively actually just makes the first film worse, and basically says in big bold letters that if you liked the first Joker, you're a fucking idiot. Like, I'm convinced director Todd Phillips hates the first Joker after watching this movie. So we're going to dive deep into Joker 2, the good, the bad, and the ugly of one of the most pointless sequels I have ever seen. And just try to figure out the burning question in my mind when the credits rolled. Just why? Now, on a side note, this isn't a sponsor. I just want to let you guys know that I will be attending PAX Oz in Melbourne as a creator. If you're going to be there next week, don't be afraid to stop me, call me a dickhead, kick me in the shin, whatever you want. I'll see you there. Now, for those worried about spoilers, I am going to keep this mostly spoiler-free until later in the video, but I'll give you plenty of warning before I do get into spoilers, because there is simply no way I can finish this video without talking about that absolute dog shit ending. So, the good. Now, despite how much this movie is getting panned by critics, this is not the worst movie of the year. It is not worse than Madam Web. It is not worse than Morbius, even though Rotten Tomatoes would have me believing otherwise. I think the excessive negativity surrounding the film just purely comes from people like myself who loved the first movie and had really high expectations. So we're naturally a little harsher on a movie that is by no means as bad as, again, a Madam Web or a Morbius or even a Borderlands. Now, before we tear this movie to shreds though, I do want to mention that there is some good here, although not much. First off, this movie is simply a 10 out of 10 on the visual front. This is one of the best looking movies of the year. Like, at worst, you can go into this movie and just appreciate that it looks great. Lawrence Sher, not sure how to pronounce it, he deserves a lot of credit for how good this movie looks. He worked on the first Joker, and the great visuals certainly carry over here. But unfortunately, that's about all that carries over. There were also some pretty great one-takes in this movie. Now, I'm pretty certain there were a few stitches to give the illusion of it being one take, think something like 1917. I really haven't seen many people mention the one takes in this movie at all. It's kind of being lost in the sea of negativity, so before I get lost in the sea of negativity, I felt that I'd bring this up because it's actually quite good. The performances in this movie are also great, regardless of how bad the script was. Joaquin Phoenix once again brings it as Arthur Fleck, and it's clear that he wasn't phoning this one in. I wouldn't be surprised, despite how poor the movie is, if he at least gets nominated for a bunch of awards for his performance here, because it was phenomenal. Brendan Gleeson is also fantastic as a prison guard in Arkham that rides the line of friendly yet sadistic. And Lady Gaga, who I think actually has serious acting chops, was good when the movie actually let her act. Most of her screen time is relegated to musical numbers, which, you know, I get because she's got a great voice, but you didn't really get many chances to see her flourish as an actress here. Lee Gill also returns as Gary from the first movie, as per the trailers, so that's not a spoiler, and his scene is the best scene of the entire movie. I loved Gary in the first movie. He was one of the only real good people in a story just filled with shitty people. And you get to see the trauma of the event where Arthur spared him from the first movie. Although he survived that day, it messed him up, and Lee Gill was phenomenal here. Now, in terms of the good, that is literally where it ends, because everything else is either just bad or straight up insulting. Okay, here we go. Now look, when it came out that we were getting a sequel to Joker, I was like everyone else. Why? Well, we all know why. But creatively speaking, I thought Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix especially wouldn't have come back, as the first film was clearly meant to be a one and done. But considering they did get Joaquin Phoenix to come back and how he notoriously doesn't do sequels, I thought, okay, there must be something in this script that has his attention. He never really struck me as an actor that just does it for money. He does it for the craft, and given his performance, I don't think that's an entirely misguided assumption here. Because he gave it his all and clearly gave a shit and didn't phone it in for a paycheck. However, I would love to know what he saw in this script that got him to agree to do this movie, because I just don't see it. So let's address the elephant in the room. This movie is a musical. Now, I had my concerns as to why they decided to completely change the formula up and make this a musical, and for many people, when they heard it was a musical, they wiped their hands with this movie and didn't even give it a chance. Me, I was still going in optimistic. It seems like a bold move, and ballsy. I respect that. I don't necessarily love musicals, but there are a handful of them that I enjoy, but I can say with full confidence that this movie did not need to be a musical. Like, at all, in any way. In fact, the musical numbers actively damaged this movie. There were several moments where the film was really getting going and it had a great scene cooking, and then it breaks out into a musical number and it's like, why? Why would you do this? You've just completely halted the momentum of the movie. I kid you not when I say this, I'm not being dramatic. Whenever the musical sections of the movie started, you could feel everyone in the theater being like, oh shit, here we go again. And I was the same. It was like I was actually enjoying the movie, and then it was like, oh no, 3 minutes of nap time now. Now again, I don't mind musicals, but the songs here weren't memorable at all. And most of the time, they just felt like they were inserted after the fact, or were just there because, well, we said we were doing a musical. It feels like Todd Phillips made a musical just because he could, but didn't stop to think if he should. The musical numbers look great, but they just take you out of the movie completely. Now, I know the idea of this being a musical in a way is to convey what Arthur is thinking and to help express that, but it just falls flat and it doesn't make the movie better. Now, not only is Joker 2 a musical, but it's also a courtroom drama. Now, I love courtroom dramas. One of my favorite movies of all time is a courtroom drama. Yet, despite the second half of this movie being a courtroom drama, say courtroom drama one more time, for pretty much all of the scenes in the courtrooms, I was just disengaged because all it really was characters recounting what we already saw in the first movie. It wasn't really doing anything new. Now, slightly mild spoilers here, it's nothing major, but the idea of the trial is for Arthur to defend himself against receiving the death penalty for those he killed in the first movie. But as a result of that, all we get are recaps from characters we know. That's it. It's just not interesting hearing what we as the audience already know. I did say that the Gary scene was the best scene in the movie. That was mainly performance driven, and it was one of the rare scenes where we actually got to see the Joker instead of Arthur hunched over in a chair saying nothing in the courtroom. Because the only time you really see him as the Joker in this movie, apart from this scene in the courtroom, is when he's in his own head. Now, I don't need to see the Joker to be entertained. The first film is evidence of that. We don't see him as the Joker properly until the third act, yet the movie is still amazing. But here, the film is just anti-Joker, which again feeds into what I said earlier with Todd Phillips seemingly not liking the way audiences took the first movie. It was like he caved to the minority of people who didn't like the first movie because it apparently sensationalized what Arthur did, so they went completely anti in the sequel. Like, how do you expect the masses to react to that? People didn't like Arthur in the first movie because he murdered people. They liked him because he was an interesting fictional character. Most of the people who like Arthur aren't raging nutjobs who agree with what he does. They just appreciate a good character in a movie. But it's like Todd Phillips got the wrong message out of the reaction of the first movie and tried to completely switch it around here, and it just doesn't work and comes off as a slap in the face to everyone who liked that first movie. Now, as I said, the courtroom drama side of the movie just retreads the same ground we already experienced in the first movie, but it's not just limited to that. There were several scenes that are carbon copies of the first movie. Like, look at this scene here with Harley and this scene with Arthur. It's the same thing, just done all over again. She also goes back to the stairs from the first movie because it was iconic, I guess. There's no actual reason for it. Like, this film doesn't do anything new despite it doing something new with it being a musical. Like, how is that even possible? This movie manages to completely switch up the formula, but just recaps the first movie and does the same thing again, just with the opposite view of Arthur as a person. Like, why does this movie exist? We all know why, but I'm talking creatively. This is a perfect example of making a sequel because the first one performed well, not because you actually have a good story to tell. Now, I don't know if Warner Brothers strong-armed Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix into doing this movie. It wouldn't surprise me if that was the case, and Todd Phillips might, I'll just give him a bit of credit here, he might have gone, you know what, you made me do this sequel, f*** you, I'm gonna make it terrible. Just a big old middle finger to the studio. If that is the case, I actually have a lot of respect for Todd Phillips. But I think that's wishful thinking on my part. I think this is just a bad movie from a director that didn't like the message the first movie sent out and the audience reactions, so that he just went in the complete opposite direction. Which just leaves me with one burning question. Who in the hell is this movie even made for? So let's go full spoiler mode now. So if for some reason you don't want this movie spoiled for you, which honestly, it's just not something you should be worried about, but here's your official spoiler warning anyway. So the final scene of the movie is the final slap in the face to the audience. Arthur ends the film right back where he started, alone and back in Arkham, leading you to wonder, okay then, what was the point of the past 2 hours? Oh, nothing. Great. Oh wait, there's another twist to the story. The guy that was standing in the background for pretty much the entire movie and did absolutely nothing, shanks Arthur in a hallway and kills him. He uses the same line he used on Murray in the first movie because we can't sensationalize Arthur and we have to spell out on a silver platter that Arthur isn't a good person, and this is where doing something like this leads you. So Arthur dies in a pool of his own blood on the ground as the guy who kills him, again, I don't even know the dude's name, he's just a random guy that sits in the background of Arkham for a couple scenes in the movie. And all of this happens because Arthur bad. This was my face throughout Arthur's entire death scene. I just felt nothing by this point. I was just staring into the blank abyss that was the final shot of this movie. It doesn't feel like a real sequel. It doesn't feel earned. It doesn't feel genuine. It feels like a filmmaker caving to minority criticism of his excellent first movie. And it's not like it was even done well. Now, I know Todd Phillips doesn't have a good track record with sequels, but I expected better out of this movie. Remember how I said this movie doesn't do anything new and just retroactively retells the events of the first movie? Well, even Arthur's death is pretty much evidence of that. We have a major death after the same punchline of the same joke. Like, if you're going to do a shameless sequel because the first one was a massive success, at least actually try and change it up. At least in the second Jurassic Park movie, they brought the frickin' dinosaurs to the people instead of the people to the dinosaurs. And that's not even a good example of a sequel, like T2 or Aliens or Shrek 2, aka the pinnacle of cinema. I just cannot stress how disappointed I am in this movie. As a massive fan of the first movie, I can actively say I hate Joker 2. Look, the red flags were there when this thing was announced, but I remained optimistic regardless, and boy was I wrong to do so. Joker 2 not only fails at being a musical, it not only fails at being a courtroom drama, but it fails as a sequel in virtually every way possible. And whilst not being the worst movie of the year, that still goes to Madam Web. It is by far the most disappointing movie of the year, and honestly the most disappointing movie I've watched since The Rise of Skywalker. So, what did you think of Joker 2? Let me know down in those comments below. Subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Drop a follow over on Instagram and X. All the links are in the description below. And until next time, take care.